Welcome to In the News, Conversations Around Security, a new and dynamic podcast where we dissect the day's headlines through the critical lens of security risk management and where awareness meets analysis. Join us on the 1st and 15th of each month as we bring you a fresh episode packed with informative debates, expert analysis, and thought-provoking insights offering a nuanced perspective on the stories that shape our world. So buckle up and join us for a look at what's in the news, conversations around security. Hello and welcome to In the News, Conversations Around Security. I'm Luciano Sardoni, your host, and with me, my co-host, Brian Clayman. We are excited about Season 2, Episode 1. We're back. We've had a great summer. I think we'll touch on that in our introduction here, but we're ready to rev up for the new year, and we're excited at some of the content we're going to be bringing you. So before that, we get into today's discussion, I'm going to hand it over to Brian. Welcome back. How's your summer gone? What have you done? What are some of the things you've seen?
Cannot believe that it's over. It's gone so quickly. So far, fall's starting off okay. I'm dreading the winter and the bad weather, but it's been a great summer. Work has been busy, but I did have some time to enjoy the finer things of life. I understand over the weekend you're sort of getting ready for the new season. You were crushing grapes barefoot the old-fashioned way and making like 6,000 bottles of wine. I know when I spoke to you yesterday, you were sounding like you were feeling no pain. Were you also tasting the wine as you were bottling it?
Yeah, well, you have to sample it to make sure it's up to snuff, right? The quality's got to be there.
Yeah.
And I didn't wash my feet, so don't worry about that. When I give you the bottle, there won't be any of that problem.
Well, it's that je ne sais quoi. It's it's really
secret sauce.
It's like it's not a French wine. It's not even an Italian wine. Certainly not Niagara. It might be like an essence of what Brampton. I don't know.
Yes, very unique.
Very unique.
All right, so listen. I know I've had a great summer as well, and I have noticed for those who are listening that Brian Clayman and Associates have also rebranded to BCA. It's just BCA or BCA and Associates.
BCA Security Management. I got rid of the associates.
Yeah,
so your days might be numbered.
Well, I was going to say you had the money to rebrand, but I didn't see a pay increase in my podcast hosting salary.
Has that not come through yet?
No,
I'll have to check with our finance department.
But it does look nice. I honestly congratulate you on the logo. It looks much more professional.
Be still my heart.
Yes, I know. Take it now. It's very early in the season, so take it while you can.
I will. Thank you.
All right. So let's move on to what's been going on over the summer. There's been no shortage of news, as I'm sure we're going to get into. I'll talk about a couple of items, but I'm going to turn it over to you to kick us off.
Well, it's interesting. We had a couple of clients actually talk to us about potential work universities, and they were interested in the campus encampments and what they can expect for next year and what they should do. It was a couple of them were saying that they weren't really concerned. They thought that was sort of yesterday's news, because over the summer it got quiet. And I think what the intelligence we see and what we're starting to see in Western Canada and some other universities in Canada and the States is starting to ramp up again. So, I think the summer sort of morphed in terms of if we talk about the disruption from demonstrations, it moved sort of from the campus to the streets. It was sort of noteworthy to me that there was not a lot of news coverage of it. So it gave the impression not a lot is happening. But if you were connected to the police community, the intelligence community, there was a lot of stuff happening, and it is ramping up. So the summer was sort of simmering a little bit. I think it's going to be an interesting fall. I think some big dates on the calendar coming up is the Jewish high holidays coming up, I believe, next week or shortly thereafter, and the anniversary of October 7th. So I think that we're going to see some activity. Plus, what's happened recently, the escalation in Lebanon. So I think it's going to be an interesting winter.
Yeah, two big dates around the corner. I agree. I think the dangerous thing that Canada seems to insist on doing is pretending that things aren't happening when they're happening. Sort of what you said about the campus protests. I mean, we've just seen in the last couple of weeks when kids have gone back to school, they may not be, encamped on the campus anymore, but there's been some incidents in the hallways, on the campuses, between the two groups, that are pretty concerning, right? Like guys going to school. There's one Jewish kid going to school. He's got his books and stuff, and all of a sudden, this guy with his kafar, approaches him out of the blue and starts making racial slurs and threats and all this kind of thing. And that's just not acceptable. And what I see from the media is basically zero coverage. Most of that stuff I find on social media. And I think that that's a big problem with Canada right now, is the assumption that the CBC and CTV are telling you the truth. We know they're not now. CTV just got caught with their pants down with the Polyev issue. And that just reaffirms what a lot of people are already, we've already seen the stats for traditional media nosedive. And now you get this type of activity. It just justifies, right or wrongly, what people's perception of traditional news is. They need to step up. They need to start getting back to traditional journalism.
Well, listen, I would agree with you. It's disappointing, but the mainstream media clearly is not reporting the news in a fair and impartial way. And, I don't think you could badmouth the whole mainstream media, and I don't think you could badmouth the whole YouTube media or the citizen journalist type media. I think, for me anyways, you've got to shop your news, and you don't have to shop your news or shop your media to get the story you want to hear. But you've got to look at the different sources so you can make an informed decision, because I'm concerned. I don't know why, a protest, let's say on the weekend in downtown Toronto, where a major intersection is shut down or you can't get to Union Station, why that doesn't get news coverage, yet someone demonstrating global warming, or, what is the rationale? Is it that they just don't want to give it oxygen? Okay, that might be, the thing to do, but that's not the role of the media.
Yeah.
Report what's happening and let the public make a decision. I mean, out of sight is out of mind. I mean, if you put on your conspiracy theory hat, you might think that the media is in cahoots, and you want to downplay it so people aren't against the anti-Israel or pro-Palestine movement. I don't believe that. But all they do is, like you said about Polyev the other day in CTV News, all they do is they discredit themselves. Yeah. Where is the editorial oversight? And it's really precious. And again, believe me, I'm not against mainstream media. I'm a little bit disappointed that they're not doing as good a job as they can. But when they do that type of thing, and they say what makes us different than the citizen journalist is editorial oversight. Where was the editorial oversight with CTV?
Yeah.
You just discredit not just CTV, but the whole mainstream.
And I'd even add on to that the recent incident with the Toronto School Board, right? Like they're taking these kids on a trip to observe, basically, and then they end up getting roped into a protest for something they probably, most of them don't even know about, let alone support. And basically being used as pawns and stooges in an agenda that most of those parents don't agree with. It's totally offside.
Well, and as noble as it was, like as the way they framed it, that we were going to go to an Indigenous protest so that the students can learn about Indigenous injustice in Canada and all that type of stuff. Last time I looked, schools should be teaching curriculum that has been vetted and validated. When you're going to a protest, by definition, that's a loose cannon. We don't know where it's going to go. Surprise, surprise, it got hijacked, okay? Yeah. But you would expect the TDSB would know, would be, and before you start taking kids, and my kids or my nephews or grandkids, I don't have any yet because my kids have let me down. But before you start taking, well, no, in case they're watching, but before you start doing that, okay, why don't you concentrate on the ABCs, like teaching math and language, and social sciences, rather than all these other things? Like, I just don't know what's happened. Well, I do know what's happened. I mean, we've just gone so far astray from what the core things are making society work. We've created the mess that we live, that we see.
So I want to change gears a little on another topic that we were talking about just before getting on the call, and that was the whole mess in terms of the migration, the recent arrests in Toronto of two of them were targeting the Toronto Dundas Square event. The one guy was in Quebec, looking to target celebrations in New York, but all Canadian conduits. But basically, and then the other piece of it is the US recently came out to say that they've never had to decline more people trying to get into their side from our side of the border than they have in the last 12 months. Something like 1,200 people they've had to decline. And in the past, it's been like only a couple hundred. So that, to me, again, indicates a failure in our ability to protect our own borders. And by definition, if they're not allowed to go to the US, they're allowed to stay in Canada. What makes that any better for us? I mean, we're just as exposed to them as the US expected to be.
Well, I'm sorry for interrupting, but I think we might have some breaking news over here. You're talking about the two arrests by the RCMP of the ISIS-inspired guys, one Canadian citizen, about the Young Dundas Square attack. Did
Yeah.
something slip out there? Has anything been released what the target was?
No,
I
I thought I read that it was going to be Dundas Square is what they were going to be targeting.
Or were you maybe sitting in on some CSIS briefing and you were told
CSIS don't
stop it?
talk to nobody no more.
And all that wine you did yesterday, it slipped out? Okay.
No,
My
no,
eyes sort of popped when you said young
no.
Dundas.
I recall, I thought I read somewhere, and I don't have the source, but I thought I read somewhere that it's Dundas Square that they were going to be targeting some kind of a protest there with machetes
Okay.
and IEDs potentially, right? They found some explosives, as I recall, as well, or
Yeah,
material.
they did.
Yeah,
Well,
so
it's interesting just to add on what you started about migrants, immigrants, whatever.
refugees, yeah. Well, don't confuse the two, because if I was an immigrant, I'd be ticked off too. Immigrants go
Well,
through
I
the
would be.
process.
I would be. Yeah, because there's a difference
Yeah,
between a legal immigrant who we need and we want and
yeah,
help to build our country and people that are illegally in Canada. Okay. And then there's everything in between, like the guys, those terror suspects arrested by the RCMP, they were legally in Canada. The guy in Montreal that was arrested by the RCMP based on FBI information,
yeah,
going to go to New York and kill a bunch of Jewish folks. Okay. He was legally in Canada. But one of the things is if my read of international law with refugees is a refugee is a signatory to the International Act on Refugees has to accept someone that appears at their border, the first border of safe passage, first country, okay, and claims refugee status. They got to let them in, protect them until they can adjudicate their claim. Question I have is, how does someone coming up from the US claim refugee status? The US is not a dangerous country. And last time I looked, because I remember when I went to school, we learned geography. Canada basically is part of North America, which is essentially an island. So how are these refugees getting to our shores? Like when I get on an airplane as a Canadian citizen to come back from Europe or the Caribbean, I got to show my papers,
yeah,
my passport, my visa. So clearly these refugees are getting on planes in Europe or somewhere else. The airlines have to check their credentials. Okay. Clearly, either they're not doing a good job or they're not doing the job at all. And then they're appearing at our border and
yeah,
become our problem. I haven't read that the airlines are getting fined or in trouble,
yep,
saying that people are being, they're showing their credential and they're flushing it down the toilet in the airplane. I think that's a criminal act. That means you come to Canada, we don't send you back to your country where you may get harmed. But we don't give you a health card and say, come back in 2 years and you can collect unemployment. We put you in detention. I
yeah.
mean, that's the problem. And I think that's what you're alluding to. The Americans are starting to speak up and say, hey, it's not just the southern border. Our friends in Canada are letting us down.
Yeah, and I think that's an unfortunate theme I've seen over the last few weeks. We are letting our allies down in terms of military spending. Our military is a joke. They're talking about deploying.
Well,
Deploying
time out,
what?
time out. Our military is not a joke. Our government support of
Our
the
government
military.
support, absolutely, you're correct. Because the people who are there that I've known, they're fantastic.
Yeah.
They're committed. They've got values. They've got morals. They got everything you want in a soldier. But yeah, you're right. The government has let them down. So what do you say? Who are you going to send over there? A couple of guys in a tanker truck, like a Tonka truck? It's ridiculous what we have, what we've allowed our armed forces to deteriorate to. And then you talked about the intelligence failures, right? Like we're getting fed information from outside sources. Had it not been for the FBI, or I can't remember who, I think it was France that let us know about one of those plots. The
I'm
U.S.
not sure.
I
I
can't
know
remember
the
which one was
Americans
which.
support. Yeah.
But the point being, it's foreign services letting us know. If they weren't there, what would have happened if we didn't have that visibility, right? Like where are our intelligence sources?
Well, and we've had previous guests from CSIS
Yeah,
on that talked about that. And they said, Phil Gursky, one of them, that Canada's a net importer of intelligence type thing. Okay. So if we want to get the product from our allies, but we're not giving back to the partnership, we're going to be cut out.
yeah,
It's just interesting how government can focus on they're sort of one-dimensional on their focus. In national security, be it on the geopolitical side, on the military side, on the immigration side, gets absolutely no oxygen in the room. this is going to pay, this is coming back to haunt us like it is in Australia,
Yeah.
like it is in many of the European countries. I mean, there before the grace of God go we, okay? It's not as bad yet here as it is. Look what's happening in the UK.
Yep.
Look what's happening in France. Okay, how did that happen? We're not there yet, but we are on the road to that. And if we don't spartan up, we will get there and we will not be able to get ourselves out of it.
That's a perfect segue into the last point where I know you wanted to touch on this, and that was the difference in approach between what we're seeing in Europe and what we're seeing in Canada in particular, because I think the US is starting to shift as well. Canada started to turn maybe, in typical Canadian fashion, sort of soft steps, baby steps in that direction. But in Europe, they have done a complete 180 in terms of this hands-off crap that we were doing, and they are banging heads literally when protesters block streets and impede public safety, all that kind of stuff.
I just want to set a framework when we talk about like butting heads or the focus is not about going after one side or the other. It's going after people that break the
Yeah,
law. And
yeah.
if one side is breaking the law and the other side isn't, then that's the side breaking the law that goes after. If both sides are, then that's who the police go after. So I just want to make that really clear. But it's really interesting if you look at a couple of European examples, and I'll give three. I'll give Hungary, I'll give Germany, and I'll give, I believe, Sweden right now. Okay. Hungary is just not taking any nonsense, okay? And I'm not a strong man like her, and I'm not necessarily saying that Viktor Orban is the best thing since sliced bread. But really, their philosophy is simple. If you're an immigrant legally in the country, then you belong. If you
Yeah.
don't, we're going to take care of you. Now, maybe it's a little bit excessive, so maybe Hungary wouldn't be the right example, but Germany is a liberal democracy, okay? And Sweden much more so. And those are two countries that are not putting up with this nonsense
Mhm.
anymore. And the police are cracking down, and they're cracking down on the lawlessness wherever it's coming from. I think it's no surprise it seems to be coming from one side rather than the other side, or more than the other side. And Germany basically have taken a position. They've been there before. They know how the story ends. They
Yep.
were the perpetrator of one of the most blackest chapters in human history type thing. And they've learned the lessons of history. Now, Sweden and some of the Scandinavian countries are really interesting because they've been very, very liberal, and they've been very open with immigration, and they've seen what has happened. And their response now is, look, this isn't a war on immigrants. This is a war on lawlessness. This is on a war on people that are in a country illegally trying to change the fabric of the country. So let's compare that now to North America. I mean, the US last year was asleep at the switch as well. I started looking, if you look on YouTube and look at NYPD,
Mhm.
liberal New York City, look what NYPD is doing. They're not putting up with the lawlessness and
Yeah.
nonsense. They're fighting back, okay, as they should. Texas, well, Texas is Texas, but
Exactly.
Texas, we could maybe learn from Texas and maybe even NYPD right now. But then we come to Canada. I cannot believe how slow we are at responding. I mean, this whole notion of keeping the peace versus enforcing the law, okay? Based on my understanding and my research is, yes, Western police, certainly in Canada, keeping the peace is the primary thing we do. But there's a point of transition where you move from keeping the peace to enforcing the law. And in respect to what's happening with all these protests, it's when it becomes an unlawful assembly. And under Section 63 of the Criminal Code of Canada, it's unlawful when the intent of the assembly is to disturb the peace or provoke fear and reasonable apprehension and intimidation, or a riot. In fairness, I don't think we've seen a lot of riots, so let's take that one out, okay, of the equation. But clearly, intent to disturb the peace, when you blockade a major thoroughfare in
Mhm.
Toronto to have your afternoon prayer, or you disrupt people going into the Union Station, that's disturbing the peace.
Yep.
That's no longer than a peaceful protest.
Peaceful process. Yeah.
Provoking fear or reasonable apprehension, well, I will tell you, there are people on both sides of the fence, okay? There's a Jewish community in Canada, which many of them are very, very scared. And you've had the occasional attacks on Muslim institutions, and those people are scared.
Yeah.
Police have a responsibility to protect all the communities, okay, and not take sides. And I'm not saying Canadian police are taking a side. I just think we put our friend Bill Needles, the former Toronto Police
Yep.
Superintendent, on the spot in the past, and other guests we had. I just think there's too much political interference happening, and I think police leaders have to grow some testicles,
Yes.
have to do their job in accordance with the Police Act. and not what Justin Trudeau or what Doug Ford or what someone do your job, enforce the law.
Yeah, I would say the leaders is the big miss there because I mean, when you watch Parliament nowadays, it's like they're in a different planet. The way the Liberal Party talks about what's going on in Canada, I don't know what Canada they're talking about, but it ain't the one the rest of us are living in. You know, like anybody you talk to, we're all struggling to make ends meet. We're all kids can't afford anything anymore. Prices of things have gone through the roof, and yet they're talking about bunnies and rainbows and everything's great. And you can understand why they're not going to tell the police to do anything because in their world everything's hunky dory. I just don't understand. Well,
Well,
there's got to be a motive for that disconnect. We just don't know what it is.
and where is the outrage? I don't know
Yeah,
if we're going to be able to insert the video clip here, but let's take it away from the pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas, anti-Israel type thing. Let's just talk about crime in Canada. There was that very high profile caught on video car theft of, I think it was a Porsche in Peel
yes, the
region.
girl.
The girl,
Yeah,
and she, under pretext of buying the car, that lady was on bail for two
yeah,
previous car theft attempts. Each time she breached her
yeah,
conditions. Guess what? She runs the guy over, but she's on bail
yeah.
again.
Again, I know.
She has conditions. Like when you talk about the people in Ottawa living in La La Land, I mean,
Yeah,
maybe what has to happen, we've got to steal their car. Maybe what has to happen is the bad guys have to run over their loved ones and their family members till they start to realize that they have a job to do. And it's not to defend just the rights of the accused, because you have to defend the rights of the accused. No one is saying that. But you also have to defend the rights of the community. And I would suggest 2 times, 3 times on bail. At some point, you got to have your ass in jail because at some point
yeah,
the conditions aren't being followed. So if you use that as an example, that type of petty crime, which is not so petty anymore, and then you look at the international geopolitical challenges, we're effed if we're
yeah.
looking at leaders to navigate us through these troubled times.
We're a welcome mat to the world's garbage, and he's invited them here, and they've taken him up on the offer. Like
And
that's what we're getting.
and my anger is less with the people that come to this country with ill
Yeah,
will. Really, I'm not even angry at them because what they're doing is they're opportunists. I'm
yeah,
angry at our political leaders and
yeah.
our
They let
lawmakers
us down.
because they're laughing at us. We open our hearts, with good intention, okay? But then they look at us and they say, "Hey, wow, we'll get there, and then we'll do our dirty work, and we're just a stone step away from the United States, and we could take over Toronto." And they're just laughing at us. So I'm not even angry at them. I know they have told us what they want to do to our way of life.
They're
People
not
want to come.
hiding it.
They're not hiding it. They're not the problem. It's the idiots on the other side, the so-called good guys.
I
And I'm
think
not
they.
and I'm not talking about the police. I'm talking about our lawmakers.
I think if I recall my exceptional police training, it's been a while, but I think I recall them saying something about that being a flag. When somebody says they're going to kill you, that means they're probably going to kill you.
Yeah, I think the reason they chose the color, if I'm not mistaken, red flag and not a pink flag, because like bullfighters wear red to get
Oh,
the bull enraged.
just clowns.
It's just amazing
It's
because
amazing, man.
they're not difficult. We make them difficult.
All right, so
Sorry, just very quick, I got to say this. Justin Trudeau, when he was on the Colbert Show the other day,
yes,
talking about what makes Canada great, he talked about our healthcare. Really?
yeah,
Like,
that's what I mean. He's in another
healthcare?
world.
I, I got a family member that had to wait 9 months to have a procedure on their heart. Our wonderful health care. I mean, listen, it's good. At least you get it, but you may not survive till you get it.
All right, let's tie this up because we can get on to another episode with that topic. No shortage of opinions there, but I just want to end it off with by the time this goes live, it's going to be October 1st. We're just on the weekend now, leading up to that. So we're gonna put up our next episode in 2 weeks, October 15th. So by then we will have experienced the anniversary date of the Gaza war, October 7th. So that should be interesting. We'd have something to talk about. But what else do you see on the horizon in the next couple of weeks that are going to pique your interest?
Clearly, what's happening with the Middle East,
Mhm.
and the fact that Canada somehow is victimized. So I'm really going to watch that very carefully. The protests are going to ramp up. I don't know what they want us to do. I know at one point they wanted Olivia Chow, to the mayor of Toronto, to tell Netanyahu to stop. Um, I don't know why she didn't do it, because I know
Wag
the
her finger.
Ben Netanyahu doesn't want to hear from her. He's got no problem with Biden, but oh God, or Trudeau, but God,
Not Olivia.
Olivia. So what I'm going to watch is really, it's going to ramp up. And it's one thing to say that you're concerned with what's happening there. I think everyone is, no matter what side of the fence you are. But I want to see what it's going to mean for Canadians and vulnerable Canadians. So I'm going to be watching that. And I'm also going to be watching carefully the situation of car theft. I recall years ago, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that was a joke. When I was in policing, the guys in the auto theft squad, there were guys that were a bit lazy. It has become such a hot button. There's so much violence associated with that. So I think maybe not in the next 2 weeks, but I think over season 2, we're going to have some episodes about that, because it really is impacting the security of businesses and people and their safety.
Yeah, I just add to that. I was on a webinar last week on civil unrest. It was being put on by the FBI, and they've got one of their statistics was that car thefts have increased in violence. So 72% of all car thefts now have violence, associated with them, as opposed to just taking the keys and leaving. They come in there with the intention of hurting somebody. So that's a little concerning. Absolutely. The only other thing I'll add on to what to look out for is we're a month and a half away from what I think is going to be a very interesting election. And we're going to have a couple of debates in the next 2 weeks. So we'll have something to talk about on that end as well. I don't know what your thoughts are. I know they're both sort of, I cannot stand Kamala Harris, whatever the
Oh,
frick.
sorry. I thought you were talking about a by-election in Toronto.
No,
Okay.
no, man.
That
I'm talking
election.
about that election,
Oh,
the
that
election,
one.
that
Okay.
one. And but there's no discounting that we may be going to a federal election anytime, really, depending on what happens.
We rebranded our podcast last year from Protecting Your Assets to In the News. Season 1 was a pretty good season. I think season 2, there's not going to be a shortage of stuff.
Material.
And we're really looking at getting really good guests and speakers. And take a look at Luciano's LinkedIn page and my LinkedIn page and the In the News LinkedIn page, because we're going to be putting a call up for different types of subject matter experts in the near future to reach out to us. I know one that I'm going to be trying to find in the next little while is someone probably retired from CBSA. I want to talk, or we would like to talk about how people, when they come to Canada and they don't have the right papers and permits and visas, how they're processed. There's a lot of rumor about what happens to people and what CBSA does and doesn't do. I have some family members in CBSA in senior positions, but they're not retired, so I wouldn't put them on the spot. So if you are a former CBSA guy or girl and would like to come on our podcast, just give Luke or I a shout on LinkedIn, and we'd love to have you.
Yeah, and following that note, some of you I know have reached out, on LinkedIn to me, interested in coming on as guests. Let us know what you want to talk about, and if it lines up with what our vision is for the podcast, then we'd certainly be happy to arrange a time and a place for us to have that chat and put it online. For those of you listening, if you can do us a favor and subscribe to our podcast, obviously that helps us with the numbers and gives us visibility in terms of what we're doing right and what we might be doing wrong. Like us on YouTube. That helps our algorithm as well and helps to spread the word. And pass it along. Share with your friends and families and network, because we are hoping to build this thing to the next level. Let's put it that way. And
yeah, Joe Rogan, watch out.
Yeah, Joe Rogan, watch
out on your tail.
If we ever get to that level, that will be something. All right. So with that, folks, I'll sign off for this episode, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Bye, everyone. Be safe.